Hi there, welcome back to Dukascopy TV. I'm Ben Jones. Protests continue in Hong Kong, and police have now started to use pepper spray and batons against the protesters. On the line with me today to discuss the impact of these protests is Amy Yuan Zhuang from Nordea Markets. Now, Amy, I'd like to start off by actually looking at some of the data coming out of Hong Kong. First of all, retail sales figures were released today, standing at 4.3%. Were you expecting the figure to be relatively strong?
I would say I wasn't that surprised as most in the market was. I mean, the 4.3% year-on-year growth, that's the retail sales volumes. And if we measure that by value, the growth was 1.4%. So the lower growth in the value indicates that the retailers probably have been forced to cut prices in order to boost the sales. But that's, of course, a phenomenon. And the second noticeable feature is that it's October data, and it does include the first week of October, which is a golden week, traditionally very popular for mainland Chinese to go to Hong Kong for shopping, and especially with the launch of new iPhones, I could imagine that the demand was from both the local Hong Kongers and from mainland Chinese could be very strong, especially taking into account that iPhone or generally Apple products are 20% more cheaper in Hong Kong than in mainland China. And finally, I would say that even though the pro-democracy protests have affected retailers in around central region, it's not the whole Hong Kong, and Kowloon actually included in the part of Hong Kong was affected. Actually, especially for the first part of October, the affected of sites were kind of restricted to only part of Hong Kong Island. So again, some shops were probably affected, but then there are other stores who were not. So therefore, the data today wasn't that big a surprise for me.
Now, later this week, manufacturing PMI is also released. Can you discuss which data has seen the biggest impact from the protests?
I would say the PMI, this is the composite index. This is probably the data that we have so far that's been worst affected. But I think it's probably unfair to attribute the effects fully to the protest, because this is a composite index. So it measures both the manufacturing activities but also the service sector. I would say the manufacturing activities have been on a declining trend the last few years. That is mainly due to China slowdown. And if we actually see a very high correlation between the PMI in Hong Kong and the PMI from mainland China, so that explains why they slow down in manufacturing. And service sector, that of course protests have been affecting the retail sector, the transport, and probably tourism. But I would say the anti-corruption campaigns from China's side have clearly also affected shopping desires and generally tourism desires to Hong Kong from mainland China.
Now, it's been stated that business activity has fallen to its lowest level for almost 3 years in Hong Kong. How much longer can this be sustained before we see a serious impact on the economy?
I would say that the severe impact will be already seen from the Q4 GDP figures. So already the economy will be affected by the protests, and that is mainly through the service sector, retail, transport, and tourism, which are quite important for the Hong Kong economy. Actually, markets have turned significantly more bearish on the overall GDP growth in Hong Kong this year, from approximately 3% for the whole year to now only 2.2%. So, and Q4 is the main reason for that. So if we see the protests to be prolonged, then definitely we're going to be quite bearish on the Q1 or perhaps the whole first half year of next year. But we will say that because of the kind of turned attitude among the local Hong Kongers, that currently I think it's 80% of the local Hong Kongers are actually against the pro-democracy movement. I think the likely impacts will be smaller and smaller, because then people will, the gathering of the protest gathering will probably be smaller and less kind of disturbing everyday lives less and less, especially now when the police are also clearing sites more often and more with more strength. But clearly, in the long term, this is bad for Hong Kong's image. Already now we have heard rumors about some international banks are considering to relocate their Asia headquarters to Singapore instead of Hong Kong. And if that is true, and if that happens to more than just the banks and maybe to other financial institutions or other international companies, that could be a very bad news for Hong Kong's economy.
Amy, thank you very much for joining me today. That's all we have time for. Dukascopy TV will be bringing you plenty of updates throughout the week, so make sure you keep clicking back. Bye for now.